What's up, everybody? Michael Walsh here. So I am actually re-recording this video. I recorded it on Sunday. I meant to put it out Sunday, but I've been having technical issues. Now, sometimes like Adobe/YouTube will just have their own problems. So it's happened in the past where I've made a video, tried to upload it. It won't upload. It'll say there's some sort of error. I'll look into what that error is, and it'll typically be associated with some formatting issue, but the formats are all correct and it's still happening. And, I'll delete the video and re-edit it and try again, and it still won't work. I'll try uploading a different video and that won't work either. And then I just wait like 12 hours or something and it works. So clearly it's just some issue with Adobe or with YouTube. So that's what I've been tinkering with the last few days. It's still not working, so I think it's some issue with the memory card I used. So I'm re-recording this video. Fingers crossed this works. I apologize that I haven't been sticking up, I haven't been delivering on my kind of usual content load. That was the reason, combined with the fact that it's another exam week for me, so it's been a little hard to, I hadn't planned on recording, Monday, for example, so it kind of just threw everything off. But I'm here now, so I'm going to redo the video that I was supposed to give you on Sunday, which is multi-topical. It involves, responding or covering, giving reaction to Moicano's performance, tying that into a broader topic that I've been meaning to do for a while, that I've kind of floated doing, in weeks past and just haven't gotten around to. And I'm going to give an update on the technical breakdown. So going in reverse order, I had said that I was going to do a technical breakdown, a technical deep dive for Van versus Taira. Now, that fight got postponed. My understanding is that Van had a minor injury, not bad enough to cancel the fight, but bad enough to postpone it. So instead of being at UFC 327, it's going to be at the following numbered event, UFC 328. So instead of co-maining for Jiri and Ulberg, it's going to co-main for Khamzat and Strickland. Now, upon hearing that news, I'd already done about 60% of the tape study. So I'd gotten Van done and was just starting on Taira. Now I'm probably just not going to do the fight because I'm definitely going to do a technical deep dive for Strickland and Khamzat. And I don't want to do two deep dives the same week for the same event. So I want to space it out more. So I will probably instead just save my notes, use them for future fights involving Taira and Van. And I will instead do either Sterling, Zalal, or more likely Praches and JDM. So one of those two, and again, probably Praches, JDM, but one of those two will be the next technical deep dive. I'll keep you informed as that approaches. And then after that, I will do Khamzat versus Strickland. And I said previously, I'm very interested in the Jiri Ulberg fight. I'm sure I'll do more content this week about that fight and that card in general coming up this weekend, but I didn't want to do a technical deep dive because it's heavyweight, Ulberg intrigues me, but not that much, and Jiri is one of my favorite fighters, and while we could analyze his style, he is nevertheless deeply chaotic, and I don't know, the flyweight co-main event seemed the much more sensible fight to do a technical deep dive about. And alas, it's been postponed, and everything I just said applies. A bit of a too long didn't read pertaining to Van, because again, I did all my tape study for him and had just started on Taira. I will give you some of my takeaways, which are, I'm a big fan of Joshua Van's fighting style. He is truly a modern sprawl and brawler. If you watched my deep dive for Evloev and Murphy, you heard me be critical of Murphy and his sprawling ability. That does not apply to a Van. He has very good sprawl. I like that from what I've seen. He uses his guard instead of turtling. So in one of his fights, he gets taken down. He goes to the butterfly guard. He frames, lands some elbows, gets double underhooks, uses that to get up. I like that. Aside from that, he does what most people do, what other people I've discussed in the previous deep dives, guys like Strickland, guys like Holloway, guys like Murphy, do, which is when they're taken down near the fence, they scoot their hips back to the fence, and this is what Van does. If the person tries to collect his legs to do the Khabib, kind of figure four your legs with his own legs and collar tie you, land uppercuts, whatever. If someone tries to do that, He tries to post, he tries to turn away, he tries to kind of point his knees down and get his knees free. And from there, he's going to do a combination of posting and overhooking, splaying the feet, getting up, and then either, trying to get bicep control or an underhook on the far side and reverse off the fence. That's kind of modern MMA 101 on the fence. That's what Van does. He's very good at it. One thing he does that I really like is that he punishes people for shooting on him. So after he sprawls on you, he almost always looks to land a strike. And he'll land strikes exiting the clinch as well. Like, he very much feels like, again, I keep saying, he's like the new iteration of Sprawl and Brawl. He very much feels like a Crow Cop or someone like that. Like watching the energy and emphaticness with which he defends takedowns, and then how he follows up with strikes, and then he's on your ass again, pressuring and trying to knock you out. I like that. That feels old school to me. And, he's a young guy. He's only 24, I believe. And Taylor himself, I think, is only 26. So they both have plenty of room to improve. But Van, the sky's the limit for him. I like what I see. His boxing is crafty. Like every boxer, he's susceptible to low kicks. But, he's got good power, good volume, good volume, but paces himself. Doesn't, even when he hurts guys, he doesn't get too carried away. Like, here and there, you'll see it where he'll start opening up on guys and he'll eat a counter or two, but he's self-aware enough to, then rein it in and pick his shots more selectively and not blow his wad. He plays with rhythm well. Like, I like that he will lead with the backhand. So instead of throwing a 1-2, he'll throw a 2-1. Like, he'll do that a lot. Sometimes he will square his feet when he does that. He will, especially if he's like kind of trying to stay on the guy or trying to pressure the guy, he will sort of kind of like lunge in and march in with his punches, and his feet will get square. But plays with rhythm well, goes to the body well, throws in combination really well, counters well, and makes mid-fight adaptions very well. In one of his fights, he was getting jabbed up like the whole first round. He just had his guard high, and boom, the jab was splitting his guard. He comes out in round 2, and it's as if he had a whole fight camp preparing for the jab in between rounds 1 and 2. I'm sure his corner was harping on him, like, yeah, the jabs, you're eating the jab all day, you gotta do something about it. But he came out, and he had like a million counters to the jab all of a sudden. He was doing pull counters. He was doing slip inside, over the top cross counters. He was slipping outside and countering. He was parrying. Like, he was just doing everything. Something on the floor. He was doing everything, like he was giving like a seminar on dealing with the jab come round 2. And that's very good. A lot of fighters can't do that. A lot of fighters can't make those sorts of in the fight adjustments. And he did, and he won, and he's looking very promising. Like, he and Michael Morales are sort of like the faces of the Sprawl and Brawl at the moment, and I like what I see. So that's sort of the too long didn't read for Joshua Van. Again, I just only started my tape study on Taylor, so I'm not going to give you a rundown on him. But that way I give you a little something for the work I'd done for that fight. But anyways, for the main body of this video, though, I want to talk about Renato Moicano, and I want to talk about grappling in MMA, and what makes grappling exciting or boring in an MMA fight, and how does it compare to what makes striking exciting or boring in an MMA fight? Because I would argue it's the exact same stuff. What I mean by that is there's kind of like 3 main factors that determine whether a grappling match or a striking match will be exciting or boring. The first is pace. So you just want a lot of stuff to happen. You want higher volume versus lower volume. You don't want a lot of if it's a grappling match, you don't want a lot of just stalling in one position, whether that's someone sitting in half guard, someone just backpacking the dude, someone holding the guy against the fence. You don't want to see a bunch of that, just, eating up whole rounds. And likewise, on the feet, you don't want to see a bunch of people just kind of like standing around, circling each other, pumping jabs, not really throwing anything. Low pace, low volume, low activity equals boring. Another factor that matters a lot is variety. Something can be high pace, but it can be repetitive. So in grappling, like I was praising Movsar Evloev for being a fairly fun grappler to watch, and I was specifically praising his fight with Aljamain Sterling as being an exceptionally fun grappling match, and I compared it to Sakuraba versus Newton, and like that's true, but sometimes his fights can get repetitive. So like I believe it was Dan Ige where you just saw the same sequence playing out round after round, where it would be like, oh, he'd be on Ige's back in the body lock, and he would do a mat return, and Ige would turtle, and Evloev would go to his various like turtle attacks and rides, and then Ige would eventually like get to the fence and start trying to get up, and Evloev would keep the body lock, and he would do a leg ride, and then Ige would eventually get up, and then he'd be in the rear body lock again, and he would do a mat return, and then Ige would be in turtle, and then he would ride him in turtle, and then he would get to the fence and start trying to get up, and then he would leg ride him, and then he'd finally get up, and he'd be on the rear body lock, and then he'd mat return him. Repeat, just same fucking sequence playing out over and over, and that's boring after a while. And you see the same thing on the feet. Like you see this a lot with like game but not very skilled strikers. So you'll see, like in my mind, I'm picturing a lot of like women's MMA fights I've seen where like the one woman will come out and have like a couple of combos she likes to throw. It'll be like, oh, 1, 2, 3, 4. And the other girl will come out and be like, okay, 1, 2, 3. And they'll just sort of my turn, your turn, my turn, your turn. Not a lot of variety, they're not throwing a lot of different combos, different strikes. They're not playing with the rhythm. They're not countering. They're not really adapting. They just sort of have their couple of moves, their couple of entries, their couple of combos they like, and they just keep doing it. And it just goes and goes and goes until a decision. And that is also boring. That is just as boring and perhaps more boring even than what I described happening in Evloev versus Ige. So that's another thing. So far we want pace. We want activity. We want stuff happening rather than not happening. We want a variety of stuff happening. So it's not just the same thing, the same sequences, the same moves over and over and over and over. And then lastly, we want danger. We want a sense that someone could get finished or could get hurt. So in grappling, that can mean submissions. That can mean threatening positions. So we don't just want, so we want to see submission attempts, and ideally we want to see close ones. We want to see people have to actually fight arms off of their throats or get their arms extended but roll out of it, and so on and so on. We want to actually see that stuff, but we also want to see dominant positions. We don't just want to see someone sitting in half guard. We want to see mounted crucifixes. We want to see mount. We want to see taking the back, etc. We want to see the stockade. And we want to see ground and pound. We want to see not just pitter-patter ground and pound, but we want to see ground and pound that looks like it can hurt you, looks like it can finish you. We want to see cuts opening up. So that's finishing threat on the ground. And on the feet, of course, we want to feel that a knockout can happen. We want to see people, who have knockout ability. So there's a tension of like, oh shit, all it takes is for this guy to connect and it's over. We want to see that. We want to see people getting rocked. We want to see people getting cut. We want to see people like wincing from body shots or limping from low kicks, or we want to see swelling on the face. We want to see discoloration on the leg. We want to see stuff like that indicates, oh, like this is damage. Like this person can't eat this for too much longer. Like, oh, what's going to happen? And you can have mixes of these different elements, and you can be lacking in some but have presence of another, and that can be enough. So like Tyron Woodley versus Stephen Thompson, the first fight, not the most exciting fight ever, but like a good watch. And a lot of it was because of the anticipation. It's because Woodley especially had the power and the explosiveness that there was just a constant risk that Thompson could get hurt. And even the rematch, which is a very boring fight, and the first fight itself isn't like exceptional, but the rematch is much worse. Even the rematch still had, at least on first viewing, some amount of tension. And it paid off to some degree because he does hurt him very badly in the fifth. It's not enough to salvage the fight as a whole, but it justified the tension. Whereas with some fights, a lot of times in women's divisions or, maybe in heavier divisions when the guy's fatigue or just, if it's two grapplers who like decide to spar with each other instead of grapple, whatever it may be, sometimes you just see these protracted striking matches And you just know there's virtually no risk that either person's going to even get dropped, let alone knocked out. And that just takes the tension out. Just like a dull sort of lay and pray grappling match takes the tension out because you're not really feeling like the one person or either person, but the person on top is going for a finish. You feel like they're just sort of riding out the clock. And you don't want to fight to feel like that. You don't want to fight to feel like a basketball game where it's just like, we just go until the time runs out and whoever has more points wins. You don't want it to feel like that. You want it to feel like there's a risk that at any moment it could be over, that someone could be knocked unconscious, choked out, what have you. And so obviously the best fights have like all of these things mixed together. There is danger, there is variety, there is high pace. And I would argue that the very best fights also have both of those things from both grappling and striking. But before I unpack that, I want to discuss what is better and worse, like boring grappling versus boring striking and exciting grappling versus exciting striking. Because I'd argue that boring striking is worse than boring grappling. I would rather watch a dull lay and pray kind of fight. I would rather watch Shevchenko's last fights, Islam's last fight, Khamzat's last fight. I would rather watch those than watch Namajunas Esparza 2. And the reason is because even when grappling is boring and even when kind of nothing's happening, at least they're engaging. At least they're working. At least there's some there's still a little bit of energy there. Whereas when striking is genuinely boring, or Ngannou versus Lewis or something, and at least that had not unlike the Woodley Thompson example, at least that had a risk someone was going to get knocked out the whole time. But so Esparza Namajunas 2 is the platonic ideal of a bad boring striking match. But when that's happening, they're not even in contact. They're just kind of moving around each other and avoiding each other. To me, that's more boring than someone just holding someone else down in half guard. They're both terrible, but that's my preference. However, I'd say when they're both exciting, that striking is more exciting. I would say that when a grappling match is exciting, you tend to see a lot of changes in position, lots of scrambles, lots of submission attempts and reversals and escapes and so on. You don't tend to see a ton of damage because for one person to land a ton of damage, they kind of need to be more dominant and the fight needs to be a little less competitive. So, meaning if we think of all-time great ground and pound performances, if we think of some of Khabib's fights or Fedor's fights or GSP's fights or, whatever, Arman Tsarukyan's fights, they tend to be one-sided. It's one person's on top and delivering all this fucking ground and pound. As opposed to something like Sterling Evloev or again Sakuraba Newton, it's this constant competitive reversal. Whereas in a striking match, it can be extremely competitive and the damage is happening. They can both be getting rocked and dropped. They can both be getting busted up. They can both be just pouring it on and the volume can be insane. Just like Poirier versus Hooker. Very competitive and they're both getting really fucked up. Again, in a grappling match, it's either really competitive but it's more explicitly grappling heavy, or someone's getting fucked up from ground and pound, but it's more one-sided. That tends to be how it goes. And I think just the danger feels more visceral with the striking, because it's just more visceral to have two guys free on the feet, landing big dynamic movements because, punches, kicks, flying knees, etc. are just more dynamic than ground and pound strikes are because you're on your feet and can generate more explosive energy. And because we are watching the UFC where you can't do cool shit like stomping people's heads and stuff. So it's going to be more dynamic on the feet. And it's also just more dramatic to see someone get knocked down, to see someone on their feet get hurt, rocked, and fall to the floor and have to get up before they get finished. All of that is just kind of more striking. It feels more like it would be more compelling in an action film or a sports film than watching someone get hurt from a powerful ground and pound strike. Even though that's cool too. It's cool watching Fedor, do his whippy punch through Nogueira's guard and just bounce his head off the canvas. That's cool to see, but that's not as cool to see as watching Frankie Edgar get dropped 3 or 4 times in one round by Gray Maynard. It's just one of those is just cooler and more dramatic. So that's that. Again, boring grappling, I would argue better than boring striking, but exciting striking better than exciting grappling. How this all connects to Renato Moicano, he is a very exciting grappler. He is giving us the things that I've been describing. Like, you watch his fight last weekend, you watch some of his other fights, like his win over Benoit Saint-Denis, etc. Like, he is going for the finish. He is a threat on the ground. He lands good ground and pound. He gets good submissions. He gets to threatening positions. He gets mount. He gets the back. And when he gets the back, it's dangerous. Like we saw in the fight this weekend, he had more of like a proper back mount where he was on the dude's back and trying to flatten him out. And he's truly on top. It's like mount, but on the back. It's truly, again, back mount. And when you are in that position, you can posture up and land strikes the way you would in conventional mount. That's why it's so fucking great. When you go for a typical back control, as he did, where you go, you actually like seatbelt on their back and you lock up either both hooks or a body triangle like he did. When you do that kind of position where you're either both on your side or you're actually on your back and they're on top of you with their back to your chest, that might be better in terms of either controlling them, like with the body triangle, or it might be better in terms of attacking the rear naked choke. It is much worse in terms of ground and pound. So that's why that can tend to be a much less exciting position where whole rounds can get stalled out. Just think of like round 4, I think it is, right, with Volk in the first Volk and Islam fight, where Islam gets his breather and just controls the back, and Volk is just sitting there like, and doing door knocking punches on his face in return. That can be dull. But Moicano did damage from the true back mount, then transitioned to the body lock triangle, and threw enough pitter-patter punches and had enough of a grip fighting game that he quickly got the rear naked choke. Like, that is exciting grappling. It has the shit we want. It's fairly high pace. There's damage. There's the threat of the finish. There's the delivery of a finish. There's dangerous positions. That is exciting to watch. And we have other grapplers like that. We've got Arman Saryukin. We've got Charles Oliveira. Even his last fight, maybe notwithstanding a little bit, that fight, there was still good, exciting grappling in that fight. There was still good ground and pound. There was still like powerful, dominant positions. There was still good submission attempts. It's just that it wasn't as great of a war as we wanted it to be, and it went all 5 rounds and yada yada. But Charles Oliveira, nevertheless, is still one of the greatest action fighters of all times. He's still one of the most exciting grapplers of all times. He still has the record by far. He keeps breaking his own record, 4 submissions in the UFC. So we can't criticize him too much for that one fight. But he represents exciting grappling. Like I said, Saint Denis and Arman already. These guys are basically doing for grappling what guys like JDM, what guys like Max Holloway, what guys like Ilia Topuria, what guys like Joshua Van are doing for striking. And that's fantastic, and I love that, and that's good to see. And it's okay as a fan to applaud that and say that Shevchenko's last fight or Khamzat's last fight were boring. Like, it's okay to say that. And it's okay to say that, like, the UFC is allowed to have a little bit of favoritism. Like I've said previously, I'm okay with the fact that Ankalaev gets less favoritism than Jiri Prochazka. I'm okay with the fact that Ankalaev had to put together a big win streak to get a title shot. I'm okay that when that fight went to a draw, he didn't get an immediate shot again. They just gave it to 2 other guys. I'm okay with the fact that after he beat Alex Pereira, narrowly but fairly, but after beating him narrowly and then losing the immediate rematch and getting blown out of the water, I'm okay with the fact they didn't give him an immediate trilogy fight. And I'm okay with the fact that he's not in the upcoming title fight this weekend. Now, if he keeps winning and they don't give him another shot, that'll be bullshit. But he already got 2 title shots. Like, I would be upset if he was just perpetually denied, the way it was looking like Evloev might be perpetually denied, and the way he might still be, because as far as I'm aware, it's not yet official that he's even going to fight Volk next. So he should, and I'm guessing he will, but to me, that's like more egregious. And that's where the UFC still needs to be meritocratic, because the UFC is not exciting enough to justify that level of fuckery. The UFC does not have a fun rule set compared to One or compared to Ryzen. The UFC does not have fun spectacle and presentation and silliness compared to One and Ryzen. Those are the action and circus organizations, and the UFC is the more serious, like creme de la creme, best fight the best. Let's separate. What's the expression? Separate the men from the boys. Like, let's do that. Let's like truly see who's pound for pound best. Let's determine like legacy and GOAT status, etc. The UFC is the place for that. So while I get that it's a business, while I get that we want to see exciting fights, while again I'm just okay as like a diehard MMA fan with Jiri getting more title shots than Ankh does. Nevertheless, there is a narrow allowance for that kind of fuckery before it goes too far and before we lose the genuine sporting element, and the UFC serves no fucking purpose. Because if it's not giving us that, then what's it giving us? If the UFC isn't giving us the best fighting the best, if the UFC isn't giving title shots to people like Evloev, what makes the UFC better than one? Why shouldn't I just watch one? Real question. Genuine question. So, again, like, it's important for us to, though, say that grapplers like Moicano, grapplers like Oliveira, like Saint-Denis, etc., are exciting. Like Tara is an exciting grappler as well. Like, we don't just want to see strikers. And that's where, like, circling back, I think many of the best fights of all time involve a mix of striking and grappling. Because even the greatest wars on the feet, if they just stay on the feet the whole time, then you run into the criticism that people offer, which is, well, this is just sloppy kickboxing. I can just watch good kickboxing. I can watch, or even just boxing, I can watch Hagler-Hearns, one of the greatest boxing wars of all time. I can watch that instead of watching Holloway versus Poirier, And there's an argument there. And I'm aware that a tiny bit of grappling happened in all three of the Holloway-Poirier fights. But you see what you take my meaning. And same with grappling, right? Like, as much as like Evloev Sterling's a fun match, you could instead just watch like the ADCC finals or something. Like, And to me, there's still the appeal of the sense that, like, yeah, but they could grapple. They're having this exciting grappling war if they're Evloev and Sterling, or they're having this exciting striking war if they are Holloway and Poirier, but they could both strike or grapple respectively. If you took Hearns and threw him into an MMA fight, or if you took Hodger Gracie and threw him into an MMA fight, I mean, he had MMA fights, but he didn't pan out that well. But if you just randomly took one of these grapplers or strikers with no training and threw them into an MMA fight, they would do terribly. They couldn't replicate the success, like Hearns could not replicate against Poirier what Max Holloway did, even though Hearns is a better striker than both of them. Because Poirier wouldn't fucking let him. He would just chop his leg once and take him down or something. So I get all of that. However, it's still, though, in my heart of hearts, though, like, feels more like a real fight and feels more like an expression of what makes MMA better than other combat sports when a war enters all phases, when it involves striking, and all the fun stuff we said, high pace, high variety, people getting hurt, etc. And it involves good grappling. It involves scrambles and big takedowns and ground and pound and submission attempts and etc. And that's why, like, to me, fights like Shogun versus Nogueira won, fights like Chandler versus Alvarez won, fights like Nasang versus Hasegawa, the best fight in the history of one championship. Fights like that stand out because they, for all sorts of reasons, but in large part because they involve all of the phases. They involve striking and grappling, and it feels like this just all-terrain, chaotic, ever-shifting battle. It feels like a movie a little bit, because a movie will involve, like a big choreographed movie fight will involve transitions like that, where like, oh shit, they're fighting with swords, and then and they're in this one room, but then one guy gets pushed off the balcony, and so now they're fighting down here, and then during the grappling match, one guy loses his sword, but he picks up a rock and he throws it, and that makes the other guy drop his sword, and now they're punching each other, and the guy slips out a knife, and now they're sliding down the hill, and a car comes, and just like it has that level of chaotic variety that you only get in MMA. You don't get that in boxing. You don't get that in grappling. The nearest you get is other mixed combat sports like combat sambo or something like that, or like full contact jiu-jitsu, like Japanese jiu-jitsu, I mean. But as far as seeing that at the elite level, consistently, MMA is the sport for that, and that's why those are the best fights. So, in summary, again, multi-topic video. Just wanted to give you guys the update why there hasn't been a video in a few days. Wanted to give you guys an update on the technical deep dives. Again, the upcoming one will probably be Praches and JDM, and then following that, Khamzat and Strickland. Moicano showed us why grappling is great. Again, the same thing that makes grappling great makes striking great. It's pace, it's variety, it's danger, and the best fights involve both. So that's all I got.